Democrats are inviting caravan after caravan, isn't that nice, of illegal aliens to flood into our country and overwhelm your communities. If you want more caravans and more crime, vote Democrat. If you want strong borders and safe communities, vote Republican.
As America awaits midterm election returns at a time when the country couldn't seem to be more divided, a federal trial started yesterday in downtown that is also being closely watched, and its outcome will also have enormous implications. In question is a question, literally, a controversial one about citizenship and its addition to the 2020 census. The plaintiffs challenging the Trump administration, 18 states in total, including New York, the District of Columbia, several cities, and a handful of immigrant groups. They all say the citizenship question was motivated by discriminatory intent against immigrants and minorities who might not answer the census out of fear of reprisal. An incorrect count would affect how election districts are being drawn and how billions of dollars of federal funds are dispersed. The case is also playing out as the so-called caravan of refugees from South and Central America continues its slow move north, and as President Trump ramps up border security with up to 15,000 U.S. troops. One member of Congress has been watching all of these developments unfold with a unique insight. Congressman Adriano Espaillat represents New York's 13th congressional district, which encompasses Upper Manhattan and a part of the Bronx. He's also first member of Congress who came to the United States as an undocumented immigrant, and he joins me now to discuss all of these issues. Congressman, welcome back to Metro Focus.
Thank you so much for inviting me once again.
So I actually just want to go straight to your personal story and take us back to when you first came to this country. How did that happen and what were the circumstances?
Well, we came here, my family and I, on a visitor's visa. My grandparents were already here since the 50s. In fact, they were here since before I was born. They were both factory workers, came here to do better for themselves and our family. And so finally we came here on a visitor's visa and we overstayed our visa and therefore found ourselves without any documentation and eventually had to go back to the Dominican Republic to get our green card, right in the middle of a civil war over there. Had we not gotten the green card, we would probably stay there and I would not be speaking to you here today.
Given the fact that you were saying that the Dominican Republic was embroiled in a civil war at the time, was that something that touched your life at all?
I think the whole experience of the war there, the aftermath of the war, which led to a great migration of Dominicans to New York City, the civil rights movement in the 60s. I remember when they sent us home from school after Martin Luther King was killed. Malcolm X was just murdered right up the block. And the Vietnam War, all of that stuff together, I think really shaped who I am today.
All right. Well, where we are with immigration right now, and especially dealing with undocumented immigrants in the country, what is it that, from your perspective, is being missed in our national dialogue?
Compassion. I think that a great portion of America, the size with the president, has lost its soul and has lost empathy and compassion for others. This nation is built on some value system that we will help the least among us. You know, and people can come from all over the world because we are America. And it's a great nation that harbors everybody and allows them to flourish. But this has changed, and there's a spirited attitude out there that I think is being pushed from the White House.
So here's one of the other questions is that right now we're seeing this movement. I mean, the president has called it a caravan. He's called it an invasion.
Correct.
Other people have said these are asylum seekers who are quite literally walking up from Central America. But how do you think is the best way for a country like America to address this large group of people who are hoping to claim asylum, but maybe we don't have the resources, maybe we don't, I mean, there wasn't, nobody applied for a visa, which technically is what the Trump administration is saying that they want people to do before they come to the country, not to come and just cross the border, not to come and overstay a visa.
The number of folks has dwindled down maybe to 3,500. And I think that because the White House has already expressed a biased opinion of it, the president going as far as saying if they throw rocks, maybe we should shoot back. I think the United Nations needs to step in and on the Mexico side of the border and ensure that no one's human rights are violated. This is a human rights crisis now. And ensure that these folks are treated with the services that they need, and that the U.S. then could vet them and see who is entitled to have apply for asylum and get asylum.
Well, so that's actually one of the issues that is also coming up, is that, because we understand there's a lot of women and children that are traveling with this group.
Most of the 2/3 of the group are women and children.
2/3 of the group.
That's
okay.
correct.
So then what are your concerns for these women and children once they cross? We've already heard the president consider re-engaging in the zero tolerance policy that we saw over the summer that led to the separation of small children from their mothers.
America rejected that action. And that's why the president had to backpedal. And that's why he had to resort to this rhetoric regarding the so-called caravan, which in itself is a very questionable word because it dehumanizes people. It gives them no face. When you say it's just a caravan, it's like a mob of people, it dehumanizes them. There are people with stories behind them and families, and some of them are running for their lives. And so what happens is that America already rejected the president's decision to split a 9-month baby from his or her mom. And America rejected the attitude that the White House had with Dreamers. Overwhelmingly, over 80% of Americans felt that Dreamers should stay in red states and blue states, in Republican and Democratic districts. Vast majority of Americans felt that it was inhumane and not like us to rip a child away from their mother's arm. So, of course, you had to pivot and shift back and then try to impose a debate about something else. And in this case, he calls it the caravan. And he says, violent, bloodthirsty people. And of course, he talks about sanctuary cities, as though a sanctuary city harbors violent criminals, when in fact, a sanctuary city, all it does is allows a mom to take her child to school without the fear that the principal is going to call ICE on her, or a grandfather to go to the emergency room without the fear that the nurse is going to call ICE on her, or even a mother.
Well, that's a perfect place to actually pivot to. I did want to bring this back to the census, and that was that you have the question of whether or not our U.S. citizen appears on the U.S. Census.
Correct.
And are you concerned that if you have constituents, if other places in New York, there's people who don't feel comfortable answering the census, what happens?
This is not just about the undocumented, by the way, that question. Because, for example, if I'm a U.S. citizen and I have to answer that questionnaire and I have to report my household, and there's an undocumented cousin or brother living in my household, I may choose not to fill that form out in fear that they will come from my brother. Services and resources and monies will be denied for all New Yorkers when the population is not counted appropriately or accurately. So U.S.-born children will get less money in their schools. Legal residents will get less money in their schools. The undocumented also will get less money. Everybody will get less money in their schools because the count will go down. And so this is something that sends a chilling effect to families throughout the country, particularly the undocumented, that will be feared, and even legal residents will fear, wait a minute, I don't know if this only applies to the undocumented. This may apply for me. But even U.S. citizens who have family members that are in that predicament may say, well, I don't want to put anybody in peril. Why am I going to fill this out?
Well, what about its impact on voting districts?
Well, that's the second phase of it, and which I think is the main objective, is to really use the census as a political tool and to have it have a count that will result in a reduction in districts and perhaps another Republican majority.
And of course, the federal funding. I mean, you sort of talked about, how even American-born citizens children wouldn't be getting the money for the schools that they need. What else would be at stake with a loss of federal funding, particularly for a city like New York?
Well, any municipality that has large numbers of immigrants will be hard-pressed not to push for this question to go off the census form. In fact, it will be sort of like government malpractice for any municipality or county not to want to have their fair share of funding to address the needs of the population that is services. I think any reduction will lose to a lack of services for everybody, not just the undocumented or green card holders, but U.S. citizens as well.
All right. Well, listen, Congressman, we'd love to have you back,
Thank
especially
you.
after the election so we can go through
Yes, we'd
what
love
was
to do that.
decided.
Thank
And of
you.
course, we will be watching this case very closely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.